Welcome to Moments in History channel. Imagine a time when Europe was a patchwork of warring tribes, a continent still reeling from the collapse of the mighty Roman Empire. Out of this chaos, one dynasty rose to forge a new empire, one that would redefine the course of Western civilization. This is the story of the Carolingian Empire, a realm built on ambition, faith, and the will of one extraordinary ruler, Charlemagne. Our story begins in the 8th century with the Frankish Kingdom, a powerful Germanic state that had already dominated Gaul for centuries. But it was under the Carolingian dynasty, named after Charlemagne's grandfather, Charles Martel, that the Franks would reach their zenith. The stage was set by Charlemagne's father, Pepin the Short, who, with papal blessing, deposed the last Merovingian king and established his family as the new rulers of the Franks. This alliance between the Carolingians and the papacy would become a defining feature of their reign, a powerful fusion of political might and spiritual authority. When Charlemagne, or Charles the Great, inherited the throne in 768, he was more than just a king. He was a relentless warrior, a shrewd statesman, and a devout Christian with a vision. He wasn't content with just ruling the Franks. He dreamed of uniting all Germanic peoples into one grand Christian kingdom. For over 3 decades, he waged near-constant military campaigns. He conquered the Lombards in Italy, subjugated the Saxons in a brutal, decades-long war, pushed back Muslim forces in Spain, and absorbed the Avars in Central Europe. His armies marched relentlessly, expanding the Frankish domain until it stretched from the Atlantic coast to the plains of Hungary, from the North Sea down to central Italy. He had forged the largest empire in Europe since the fall of Rome. The climax of his reign, and a pivotal moment in European history, occurred on Christmas Day in the year 800. While Charlemagne was praying in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, Pope Leo III placed a crown on his head and declared him Emperor of the Romans. This was a monumental act. It wasn't just a fancy title, it was a revival of the Western Roman imperial tradition, which had been dormant for over 300 years. More importantly, it symbolically merged the power of the emperor with the divine authority of the Church. This new concept, later known as the Holy Roman Empire, would shape European politics for the next 1,000 years. It established the idea that a secular ruler's power was legitimized by God through the Pope. But Charlemagne's empire was built on more than just conquest. He understood that to rule such a vast and diverse territory, he needed a strong, centralized administration. He divided his empire into counties, each governed by a loyal count responsible for justice, tax collection, and raising troops. To keep these powerful nobles in check, he created a brilliant system of royal inspectors known as the missi dominici, meaning envoys of the Lord. These pairs of officials, usually one clergyman and one layman, traveled throughout the empire, ensuring that the emperor's laws, known as capitularies, were being enforced fairly. They were the emperor's eyes and ears, a direct link between the central court and the farthest corners of the realm. This system helped unify the diverse laws and customs of the conquered peoples under a single imperial authority. Perhaps Charlemagne's most enduring legacy, however, was cultural. His reign sparked a period of intellectual and artistic revival that historians call the Carolingian Renaissance. Charlemagne, though likely only semi-literate himself, had a profound respect for learning. He gathered the brightest scholars from across Europe at his court in Aachen, creating a vibrant intellectual center. Men like Alcuin of York were tasked with a monumental project to reform education and the church. Their goals were both practical and spiritual. A better educated clergy could better serve the Christian population, and a standardized liturgy would unify religious practice across the empire. Monasteries and cathedral schools became the engines of this renaissance. Scribes diligently copied and preserved ancient texts from Greece and Rome, saving countless works of philosophy, literature, and science from being lost to history. Without their efforts, our knowledge of the ancient world would be significantly poorer. One of the most significant innovations of this period was the development of a new script called Carolingian minuscule. Before this, writing was often a messy, hard-to-read affair, with different regions using different styles. Carolingian minuscule was clear, uniform, and easy to read, with distinct upper and lowercase letters and spaces between words. This standardization made copying texts faster and more accurate. It spread rapidly across Europe and became so successful that it forms the basis of the lowercase letters we still use today. Every time you read a book or type on a keyboard, you are using a direct descendant of a script developed in Charlemagne's empire. This cultural flowering also saw a revival in art and architecture. Inspired by Roman and Byzantine models, Carolingian architects built magnificent churches and palaces, most famously the Palatine Chapel in Aachen. This chapel, with its stunning octagonal design, was meant to rival the great churches of Rome and Constantinople, a clear statement of Charlemagne's imperial power and piety. The Carolingian Empire seemed to be a new, stable force in Europe, but like many great empires built by a single powerful figure, its unity was fragile. After Charlemagne's death in 814, the immense structure he had built began to show cracks. His son, Louis the Pious, was a capable ruler, but lacked his father's commanding presence and military genius. He struggled to keep his ambitious sons and the powerful nobility in line. The real trouble began after Louis's death. His three surviving sons, Lothair, Louis the German, and Charles the Bald, vied for control, plunging the empire into a devastating civil war. Their personal ambitions and the deep-seated regional differences within the empire proved too strong to overcome. The Frankish tradition of dividing inheritance among sons, which Charlemagne had temporarily suspended, re-emerged with a vengeance. The conflict culminated in the Treaty of Verdun in 843. This landmark agreement formally partitioned the Carolingian Empire into three separate kingdoms. Charles the Bald received West Francia, which would eventually become the Kingdom of France. Louis the German took East Francia, the precursor to modern Germany, and Lothair, the eldest, received the Middle Kingdom, a long, awkward strip of land called Lotharingia that stretched from the Low Countries down through Burgundy and into northern Italy, along with the imperial title. This division was a turning point. The Middle Kingdom, lacking any geographic or cultural unity, quickly fragmented and became a source of conflict between its eastern and western neighbors for centuries to come. The dream of a unified Christian empire in the West was shattered, seemingly forever. As if the internal divisions weren't enough, the splintered kingdoms faced a terrifying new wave of external threats. From the north came the Vikings, skilled seafarers who sailed their longships up rivers to raid and terrorize cities deep inland, including Paris. From the east, the nomadic Magyars, expert horsemen, swept across the plains, plundering and leaving destruction in their wake. And from the south, Saracen pirates from North Africa raided the Mediterranean coasts, even sacking Rome itself. The Carolingian rulers, busy fighting each other, were unable to mount a coordinated and effective defense. Local lords and nobles had to take matters into their own hands, building castles and raising private armies. This process accelerated the shift of power from the central monarch to a decentralized feudal system. By the end of the 9th century, the Carolingian Empire had effectively ceased to exist. The imperial title held little real power, and the three kingdoms had drifted further and further apart, developing their own distinct languages, cultures, and political identities. The great project of Charlemagne had come to an end. So, was it all a failure? Absolutely not. The Carolingian Empire, though short-lived, left an indelible mark on Europe. It created the very idea of Europe as a distinct political and cultural entity, united by Christianity. The imperial ideal born on Christmas Day in 800 would inspire rulers for centuries, most directly in the form of the Holy Roman Empire, which would dominate Central Europe until the 19th century. The division of the empire at Verdun laid the political foundations for the modern nations of France and Germany. The Carolingian Renaissance preserved classical knowledge that would fuel later intellectual movements, and the legal and administrative reforms of Charlemagne provided a model for future medieval kings seeking to strengthen their states. The Carolingian Empire stands as a bridge between the ancient world and the High Middle Ages. It was a bold attempt to restore order and unity from chaos, a brief but brilliant flash of light in the so-called Dark Ages. While the empire itself crumbled, the legacy of Charlemagne and his vision for a united Christian Europe continued to echo through the centuries, shaping the continent in ways we can still see today. Thank you for watching. If you found this journey into the Carolingian world fascinating, please hit the like button, subscribe to Moments in History channel, and ring the bell for more deep dives into history. Let us know in the comments what historical empire you'd like us to explore next.